because they feel that lost, that pushed out, that marginalised even, that just they don't see any hope in it at all. And this is our communities we're talking about, our kids, our sons, our nephews.
So what they wanted to do was, if you like, provide an example through a path that should not be followed.
Et ce qui m'a sauvé la vie là, c'est l'art et la culture en fait, à travers les livres et l'écriture.
And what saved his life in jail was art.
As I say, it's been a safety net for me. It's the only thing that's worked in 16 years is art.
Welcome to this discussion around a man standing and Doubting Thomas and theatre and prisons. So I'll very quickly introduce everyone. My name is Philip Crispin. I'm the translator and interpreter for A Man Standing. I'm a lecturer in drama at the University of Hull. Jeremy Weller is the director of Grassmarket Projects. I'll allow people to speak more about their own projects themselves. Kenny MacAskill, apologies, former Minister of Justice in Scotland. John Riley, who's in Doubting Thomas, one of the actors. Jean-Marc Mahy, who plays himself in A Man Standing. Jean-Michel van den Eyden, who is the director. And Mark Trainer, who is the dramaturge and Associate Director of Grassmarket Projects and Doubting Thomas. So I thought to get the ball rolling, what I would do would be to ask our two actors here a bit about about their lives and then how they've got to be involved in this project. Alors, je te demande, and I will translate for Jean-Marc. Jean-Marc doesn't speak English. Un peu de ta vie dans une minute et comment tu as découvert ce projet avec Jean-Michel. OK?
Donc voilà, j'ai voulu créer un homme debout avec Jean-Michel van den Eyden parce qu'on pensait que c'était un théâtre qui pouvait apporter de la réflexion aux gens par rapport à la prison.
Great. He thought that he wanted to create this project with Jean-Michel, A Man Standing, because he thought it would make people reflect about their lives and about prison.
Donc pendant 20 ans, j'ai passé ma vie en prison.
So for 20 years he spent 20 years of his life in prison.
Dont 3 ans dans un quartier supermax.
3 in a high security prison.
Et on a voulu montrer à travers Un homme debout l'exemple dans l'inexemplarité en fait.
So what they wanted to do was, if you like, provide an example through a path that should not be followed.
Et ce qui m'a sauvé la vie là, c'est l'art et la culture en fait, à travers les livres et l'écriture.
And what saved his life in jail was art, through art, culture, literature.
Donc il a fallu vraiment que j'aille au fond de moi-même pour me rendre compte de tout le potentiel et les capacités que j'avais mais que je n'avais pas vu avant.
So he had to go deep down into himself in order to really appreciate his own capacities that he hadn't appreciated before in his life.
Et donc depuis ma sortie de prison, j'ai fait des études pour devenir éducateur.
And since he left prison, he studied how to become an educator, a teacher.
Pour aller raconter mon histoire à la jeunesse.
In order to tell his story to youth, to young people.
Sans leur faire de la morale.
Without moralizing.
Simplement leur expliquer que les rêves, ils se réalisent en liberté.
Simply to say that dreams are realized in freedom, in liberty.
Parce qu'il n'y a pas de rêve en prison.
There are no dreams in prison.
Et un des messages que j'essaye de faire passer aux jeunes, c'est de dire qu'il ne faut pas prédire son avenir, mais inventer son avenir.
So one of the important messages he wanted to tell to young people was you shouldn't predict your future, but you must invent it.
Donc, Un homme debout est un outil pédagogique extraordinaire pour les jeunes.
So A Man Standing is an extraordinary pedagogical tool for young people.
Mais mon vrai travail est un travail de prévention et de sensibilisation contre la violence.
But my true work is to make people sensitive towards violence and to warn against violence.
Et je vais dans les écoles primaires jusqu'aux universités.
And he goes from primary schools all the way up to universities.
En passant par les centres fermés pour mineurs délinquants.
And also juvenile detention centers.
Et les associations qui travaillent avec une jeunesse un peu désespérés dans certains quartiers qui sont laissés à l'abandon.
And also with charities and associations who work with young people in precarious and marginalised situations.
Voilà. Un des messages finaux, c'est de dire que même si un homme a été enfermé,
So one of the final messages is to say that even if a man is imprisoned,
même en liberté,
even whilst supposedly free in liberty, at liberty,
on a toujours l'espoir de pouvoir s'en sortir.
you always have the hope that you can get away from that situation.
Comme dirait Nelson Mandela, step by step.
As Nelson Mandela said, step by step. Merci Jean-Marc. On le laisse là. And I'm going to turn to John Riley now. John, tell me a little bit about, as much as you want to, about your life and how you got involved with Jeremy.
My life through the criminal justice has been chaotic, 16 years, and doing every course that you can imagine, behaviour therapy, controlling anger, regulating emotions, bereavement, drug awareness, alcohol awareness. Didn't work for me to 3 years ago.
Great. So what happened 3 years ago then?
Worked with the Citizen Theatre, done creative projects in prison.
And that was that with a group that would come in every week to work with you?
They had a 3-year residency, and I've done the full 3 year in prison. And then once we came out, there was a prisoner called Hugh Young, started up a company called Street Cones. So I went out and get involved with Citizen Theatre and then Street Cones, and then that's when we get the invite to go and meet Jeremy 6 months ago. And we did that, and it was just talk about the plan, the future, the Doubting Thomas, and then we done rehearsals in Glasgow. But as again, when we came out of prison, there was no hope for us. I try to say the same message full of drugs and drink, and nobody listened to me, and it's only through art. That's me coming up to a year out of prison, and
It's coming up to a year now.
21st August this year, I'll be me out a year, and that's the longest I've been out of my life.
So you found again, like Jean-Marc, that it's actually been art, being involved in a creative project that has given you some hope for the future.
Well, it has given me hope because it's building my confidence. I start to express, I start to see things different, I get empathy for it, and I start to see things in a different way. And plus it gets an educational tool for people coming up and about us. I'm for a housing scheme, and it's educating them, and it's actually putting our message out there without being violent on the paper. It's been therapeutic for me, as I say. It's been a safety net for me. It's the only thing that's worked in 16 years is art.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Jeremy, would you like to say a little bit about Grassmarket and particularly this project and how you've been working with John and the other actors?
I mean, very similar to yourself, that art often is used to embellish fantasy and embellish kind of ideas and dreams. But my version of art is to actually go to people with experiences and make them the collaborators, make them the people to tell their own stories. So train them into actors, train them into performers. Many of the people in Doubting Thomas have never even been in a theatre before, let alone performed. And make them carry the voice of their own experiences, of their own kindred spirits. So John was saying, the housing schemes, he's actually able to address them. Often when someone addresses a social issue like violence, sectarianism, crime, it's from a very academic or it's from a very removed position. What John's doing and Thomas is doing, they're addressing change. They're addressing changing your identity. They're addressing changing who you are in society, your position, but through themselves and their own movement. So it's quite profound because it's got a therapeutic aspect, it's got a psychological aspect, it's got a spiritual aspect, but more than anything, it's got a social aspect because, as Thomas says in the piece of work, I'm moving from this character to this character. And also, it's a kind of examination of what acting is. We're all acting. Thomas says so himself. So it kind of identifies that your role that you're born into could be yours fixed for life. But actually Thomas is saying, I wanted to change my role And he said himself he's still involved in that struggle to change. Grassmarket projects use the whole world as our kind of casting room to bring in untrained actors to tell their stories, because we need new voices, we need to hear new experiences, we need to know how other people live. Otherwise we tend to sort of judge them by what we know, the limited amount of information we know. And this kind of theatre, it's rough, it's ready, it's unmediated really, it's theatre at its most basic, because it's actually saying, here, take this stage, show your life, show your experiences, show what you struggle with, let the academics dissect it, let the psychologists dissect it, but this is real life experience.
Do you know that the Summerhall gave us this room precisely for that reason? We're in the dissection room, as you all know, ladies and gentlemen. Jeremy, I'd just like to take you up on that. This has all been fascinating, and it resonates, I think, profoundly with something in A Man Standing. And I'm going to first of all ask Jean-Marc about this. Il y a une grande résonance entre les deux projets. Les ex-prisonniers dans Doubting Thomas parlent de fait qu'on porte les masques, wearing masks. Et je sais que toi aussi tu parles de ça, et tu parles du lever du rideau dans la pièce. Peut-être tu voudrais parler un peu de ça. So I'm asking Jean-Marc to speak a little bit about something very similar about wearing masks.
Ben, moi je pars du principe que chaque être humain vient au monde avec autant de qualités que de défauts.
So Jean-Marc starts from the starting point that every human being has as many good points as bad points, qualities as defaults.
Moi, dans la première partie de ma vie, dans mon enfance et dans ma jeunesse,
in the first part of his life, during his childhood and his youth,
je n'avais ouvert qu'une partie de ce rideau, une moitié, et c'était les points négatifs, les défauts que j'avais.
So in that first part, he only opened the negative side of himself through the curtain.
Donc ce sont des cris de colère, c'est de la violence, c'est la fuite en avant, montrer tous les aspects négatifs de ma personnalité, mais qui sont en fait des appels au secours en fait.
So the first part of his life were cries, violence, anger, but these were actually cries for help, he's realized subsequently.
Et donc le 14 juillet 1987, quand j'ai raté mon suicide,
so on the 14th of July 1987, when he made a failed suicide attempt,
je me suis souvenu qu'un éducateur m'avait dit qu'il fallait effectivement que j'enlève ce masque, que je sois moi-même, que je joue mon propre rôle.
So he remembered at that moment that an educator, one of the social worker come teachers, had said to him that he had to peel off his mask and to face up to his real self.
Et donc j'ai cette très belle phrase, la violence est le bruit d'une souffrance qui n'est pas entendue.
So he has a very beautiful expression which is, violence is the cry of suffering which is not heard.
J'ai appris à mettre des mots sur des mots.
He then learned to place words upon words.
Et grâce à l'écriture et beaucoup à la lecture.
Thanks to writing, but especially thanks to reading.
Donc ce sont vraiment des livres très forts comme Maximilien Kolb, Nelson Mandela, Henri Charrière. Ce sont ces gens-là qui, par leur expérience de vie, m'ont fait grandir.
And it was thanks to some very profound books by Nelson Mandela, Maximilian Kolbe, who was a Polish priest who was martyred in Auschwitz. These books helped him develop as a human.
J'ai juste encore une chose à dire, j'en terminerai là. Il y a des gens qui sont capables d'avoir les capacités mentales de le faire tout seuls.
He'd like to conclude with this thought that there are some people who have the mental strength to do this all by themselves.
Mais il y a des gens, il faut parfois leur tendre la main.
But there are many you need to offer your helping hand to these other people.
Pour qu'ils retrouvent confiance en eux.
So that they can find confidence in themselves. Merci, thank you. Jean-Michel, would you like to talk a little bit about why you were impelled to make this project yourself?
Because I was really, it was more than impressive by his word and by his experience. And I really believe in life that you need to hear other experience to grow up. I really think about this kind of pedagogical system.
It's a little bit, as Jeremy was saying here, other voices that we don't necessarily hear.
I think he said a lot of things that I really trust in myself, so we can talk together after.
And talk later.
I really love, as an artistic director of a theater to put words on the stage who are not from books or from actors, but from people. I really love this. It must not be just a kind of thinking, but when I meet someone who is, for me, very important with his word, with his thinking, what he trusts and wants to change in life, in society, I really love to have a work together. Yeah. And I'm not a specialist of prison working. I just meet Jean-Marc, and I work a lot with teenager who was in failures, you know. Yeah. And when I hear his experience, I really want to give this to the youth. It was really this piece was really made to the youth. Yeah. It was really a gift of it's not only about jail and prison problems. For me, it's the capacity that everyone have in his own life to change. And I think it's really, I think you are able to change each time of your life. Maybe it's more and more difficult when time goes on. But I really believe in the youth. There are so period, you know.
So there are periods?
Periods very important where you need to have the good decision for your life. And it's because of this I really want to work with him, because, like he said, he is an example in not exemplarity, you know, non-exemplaire. Yeah. And I love what he wants to do today, you know.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was this thing who makes me want to work with him.
Wonderful. Mark, is there anything that you've heard so far that you would like to bring into the discussion here?
I'd probably just say that from the beginning of this year and working with John and Thomas and the rest of the cast, that we've been going on this journey with them, so we're kind of doing it all together, and we're learning lots about why we're doing this work. I think we've always had an idea. There's a reason, there's a shared reason why Jeremy and I are working together. It's because it's about showing something as honestly and as truthfully on stage as possible, and allowing, just to reiterate, is that to allow people to have a voice and to learn about themselves through the work that we create together as a collaboration. I think that it's really vital and important, especially in the age where we're living at the moment, where there's a lot of mediation, a lot of kind of distance between what's reality and what is fake or So I think what we're doing, or what we're striving to do collectively, and what other artists around the world are doing is really vitally important at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you very much. John, I'd just like to ask you, you met Jeremy, did you say 6 months ago? Yeah. And you started by doing a lot of talking. When did you start to actually make the play itself? This is Thomas McCruden, everyone.
Sorry, I'm late, everybody. I had to get my cell here.
Oh.
Is that you being funny?
Uh-oh.
It's a line from the play, everyone, if you haven't seen it.
And money's always difficult.
So after this talking process, what was the next stage? How did you start to make the play?
We started about the middle of July, I think. We done rehearsals and just revised and improvised the scenes, and at the start it was all getting recorded and it was getting transcribed, and then we done it again and that didn't work, and just test, try and error, didn't go, and just keep doing that. Did you 3 days a week.
Was that a very enjoyable process, the acting part, the improvising, or was it quite stressful or traumatic? How did you find it?
Well, it was stressful and emotional, because you're reliving back things that you'd never spoke to you about before, or you've told 1 or 2 people, and it opens up all your emotions. When it was stressful, aye, but in that we were also laughing to be that, because we couldn't do that straight. We had to have
Did any
First
of you know each other before you got involved with the project or not?
We did, aye, because Tosh mentored me. When I was in prison, he came up to do the thing for the student council, and since then I mentored him, and he done our play with street cones at Changes at Crieff Hydro.
Right.
He supported me, and he supported me all the way through my journeys being out of prison.
Well, this is interesting. So there's another interesting sort of link here. Jean-Marc does a lot of going out to speak to young people and education, and Thomas obviously is doing something similar with mentoring, visiting people in positions that you lived through yourself, Thomas. Would you like to tell us a little bit, maybe first of all, about your history, as much as you want to, and then...
Come and watch the play, you get
Yeah.
that bit.
And then a little bit about how you've become involved in this whole project and your journey into making theatre.
Well, for me it started 5-6 years ago. So it did when I started. I met a man called Pete White, and we started Positive Prison, Positive Futures together, and it just went for there. I got confidence from that, getting that second chance, getting that opportunity to talk to people, to talk to these boys who are me. They're coming in the same path as me. I've already tread it before. It's just going back and showing them. There's a hole there, wee man. Watch yourself. Just guiding them. Do you know what I mean? That's the biggest thing we're doing. And it's not about doing it for people. It's just standing next to them. You stand next to people, and then they get strength for that themselves, and they go and do it himself. I met John in prison, and I've supported him since then. But John's done it all himself. Do you know what I mean? John's done it all himself. It's just me standing next to him. He gets courage after me already being there before him. And that's what it is. It's just giving each other courage and turning back. If you need a hand, if he's tripped up, then pick him up. That's all we're asking for. We're just asking for an opportunity to make up for our mistakes. We've got a lot of experience. Not as much as some people would say is good to have a good life. Do you know what I mean? But we've got enough experience to make our society better with the mistakes that we've made ourselves. This is the whole thing about... And the plays, for me, I think that's the play. When I watched One Man Standing, it's the same thing. It's that journey. It's that, whoa, I was a lost boy. I made a mistake. Here I am now. See me now. It's the same thing. This is what we're doing. John's doing the same, and he stands up. All the other boys we supported, Positive Prisons, all the other boys who are out there, that's all they want, a chance to stand up. They don't want you to go out and do it for them, or bring it to them, give them the opportunities, and the boys will take it themselves, they'll grasp it. And that's, for me, and then running in to get involved with the play, I've always liked writing, but I was always pretending to be somebody else. So I couldn't write, that's for fairy. Can't do that. So I always had that. And then when I got the opportunity, when I went to prison, somebody asked me, one of the teachers in a class, I went to education, she asked me to write a story. I wrote a story to win a competition. I won a competition. Do you know what I mean? And it just went for there, and then when I came out of prison, I was stuck for 8 years, as I call it, limbo land. I'd already made that change, and I couldn't get back to the old world because I made that change. I had a conscience, I just couldn't pretend and act anymore. But you wouldn't let me into your world either, because you could smell the old world off me. So where was I? Where did I go? Where do other boys like me go? We're in the shadows at your communities, your streets, and then we complain when they're on the brew. We call them names and scroungers, this, that. None of they're lost, they're stuck between two worlds. Employers won't give them any jobs. 75% of employers in Scotland or Britain discriminate against people with convictions. And then you add in your lack of confidence, your vocabulary on top of that, and your ability and your skills. Your chances of getting a job are getting lower and lower all the time. So when these boys come out of prison and made that change, a lot of you don't see that change because you don't see the boys. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think this is what our plays are about. It's just asking you to see us as boys. We're here men, we're putting ourselves out there. A lot of you are judges, some of them in a good way and some in a bad way, but we're still putting ourselves out there as men. But we made no mistakes as boys. And we're still having to carry that through. When do we stop? When do we stop making mistakes? When do we get chances? When does desistance halt and when do acceptance begin?
That's really fascinating, Thomas. Thank you very much. I'm struck by there's almost like a paradox here, where what I think has been so powerful about both projects is this unmediated authenticity that we're having. And it's not actors performing your lives, you're doing it yourselves. But then you both have embraced art, and you've both been empowered through art, through literature, writing stories, reading. But then the great Augusto Boal said that we're all actors, we're all artists, and that's the important thing is to realise this, because the other paradox is we've established you're all wearing masks, so you're all performing anyway, even though you won't see that when you're younger. So there are these interesting paradoxes, it seems, going on. So I just thought maybe we can reflect on that, and anyone from the panel can come back and talk about this. But I'd just like to ask Kenny MacAskill to possibly add any reflections he might have on what he's heard so far, and possibly to do with the prison system, rehabilitation, anything you like, Kenny, really.
No, I think it's quite humbling to be here. I've usually looked at things from the different policy directive as opposed to the ground, but I think what you see is, whether it's Belgium, whether it's Scotland, it's the same. I think my friend Andrew Coyle, who's seen the play, probably put it best to me. If you want to find out who a minority is in a society, and I remember him saying that, and I hadn't thought about it till he said it, you want to look at who the minorities are in a society, look at their prisons. And of course you go to the United States, it's black and Latinos. You go to Germany, it might be East Europeans or Turks. You go to Scotland, it's the poor. It's the Aboriginals or the Maoris in New Zealand and Australia. It tends to be the minorities in Scotland. We lock up the poor, and it'll be the same in Belgium. There was a study carried out many years now, I think it was a decade ago, where they worked out that something like 25% of Scotland's prisoners came from almost 25 housing schemes.
Postcodes.
It'll be 50% of Scotland's prisoners come from a very small number of areas. You can name the areas in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, Aberdeen, bits of Lanarkshire. Equally, I have to say, when I first became Justice Secretary, and I said this to Thomas after the play, I thought we'll get in footballers and we'll get in rock stars, and we realised actually the people who communicate best are those that the young men, and it's invariably young men, can relate to best, who are the ones that they at one stage looked up to. And that's why the work that's been done by Tosh, by John, is outstanding work. They're the ones that can, because they've not just talked the talk, they've walked the walk, they can help each other. But I'll just finally conclude. I mean, there's a friend of mine, Norman Drummond, and I swear by Norman's thing, what you need is, and I think both Jean-Marc, John and Tosh have both summed it up, self-esteem, hope and aspiration. If you don't have self-esteem, if you don't believe in yourself, you can't do anything, and more young men in Scotland kill themselves than ever kill another young man, and we forget that. But you need to have hope that things can get better, and then you need to have aspiration that I did well today, but I'll do better next time. I wrote well in this play, but next play will be even better. So you need self-esteem, hope and aspiration. And the reason that the too many young people are in prison is they just don't have that self-esteem. There's a small minority in Scotland are career criminals. The rest are people who have fallen by the wayside.
Yeah. Did you want to respond to what
Well,
Kenny
it's just
was
that
saying?
one of the biggest things, see when you have no hope, consequences do not come into the equation. Do you know what I mean? So we hear all the time, what about the consequences? Think about the consequences. We can't think about the consequences. They're not there. You're not getting any hope. There's no consequences to it, no matter what you do. We're surviving every day. We've got boys on our streets and our streets and our surviving every day. And that's what they're feeling like. I work with boys now who say to me they would rather be in prison than be in the streets with you or in the communities with you. Because they feel that lost, that pushed out, that marginalised even, that just they don't see any hope in it at all. And this is our communities we're talking about, our kids, our sons, our nephews, and they're feeling that way. We need to do something about that. I mean, when I was growing up and younger, you didn't want to go to prison. You went to prison and you failed, you done something wrong, you get caught. Do you know what I mean? But young boys nowadays would rather go to prison.
Is it worth exploring why there is no hope? Have you got any answers to that?
For me, it's acceptance. The biggest thing is acceptance. We've already been punished. We've made up for it. Most of us come out of prison, we've changed. If you get the opportunity to see the change, then you would see that, and then you would give opportunities to come back into the community, go into employment, to start things up. I've helped boys out of prison who have started their own businesses, and at the start they've said to me, Tosh, all I know is drug dealing. I says, well, you're an entrepreneur then. You need to get your bills to pay, you need to get your stock in, you need to get it out to your suppliers, and you need to pay it at the end of the month. That's skills, transferable skills. And when we tell the boys that, they go, wait a minute then. And now, I think about 2 or 3 boys since then I've worked with have got their own businesses. It is possible if we give them a chance and an opportunity.
But I think a lot of young people can't imagine change. And the systems in place are often based on holding them in the place they're in. So to change is a massive thing for anyone, whether they've been in the criminal system or not in the criminal system. Change costs. Change usually involves some sort of life shock. So how do you actually implant that life shock into the criminal system?
Well,
I don't know.
This is what we're trying to do in a sense of no, it's our boys are grown up, they've got heroes, they can't reach them. Give them real heroes, ones that reach, ones that came from the same streets as them. Guys like us who have changed, guys like us who have made a difference in their own lives and other people's lives. Mm-hmm. They're the ones we'll be saying to boys like, this is who you should aspire to be.
So they need positive role models.
Aye, but one can reach, no ones for Hollywood, no, I'm talking about ones the boys
from
can
their
reach.
own community.
Real live people that they know, that lived in their streets, they know they've survived every day like they know they've struggled through the same discrimination and lost opportunities as them. That's the ones we need to put in front of our boys so that they can see there is hope, there is a chance. Well, if he can do it, that's what a lot of boys say to me. They look at me and go, but you were, but look at me now.
Thomas, I'm just going to let Jean-Marc come in because I think he wants to add something to this as well.
Donc moi je dirais que quand je vais témoigner dans les prisons,
so when I go to bear witness in prisons,
les détenus disent je vais commencer à penser à ma vie en liberté quand je serai libéré.
So prisoners say I'll start to think about my freedom when I'm going to be free.
Et moi je leur dis qu'ils doivent se servir de ce temps perdu qu'est la prison.
I say to them they've got to make use of the lost time which is prison.
Pour se poser les questions, et toutes les questions sont bonnes.
To pose questions, and all questions are good ones.
Est-ce que quelqu'un va m'attendre dehors?
Is somebody going to be expecting me when I leave, to be waiting for me when I get out?
Est-ce que je vais pouvoir trouver un logement?
Will I be able to find somewhere to live?
Avoir un travail?
Have a job?
Faire du théâtre, du sport?
Make theatre, do sport?
En fait, moi je vais dire 3 chiffres de ma réalité depuis 13 ans que je suis sorti de prison.
So I'm going to tell you 3 things about my reality in the 13 years since I've come out.
Donc en 13 ans, j'ai déménagé 9 fois.
So I've moved 9 times in 13 years.
Parce que 6 fois, mes propriétaires m'ont vu à la télévision.
Because 6 times the proprietors of where I was living saw me on television.
Donc ils m'ont appelé en catastrophe en disant vous m'aviez pas dit que vous étiez allé en prison.
So they phoned him up and said you didn't tell me you were in prison. So they booted him out.
Et j'ai répondu mais si je vous l'avais dit, vous m'auriez pas pris.
I said to them if I told you you wouldn't have taken me.
En 13 ans, j'ai eu 10 contrats de travail.
In 13 years I've had 10 job opportunities.
Et à 6 reprises, quand mon patron a appris que j'ai fait de la prison, il m'a viré.
6 out of the 10 times when the bosses knew that I'd been in jail, they sacked me.
Mais je pense que le plus beau chiffre dans ma vie, c'est que sur 10 portes auxquelles j'ai été frappé,
But he thinks that the best statistic he can give you is out of 10 doors on which he went to knock,
il y en a 9 qui sont restés fermés.
9 remained closed,
Ce qui est normal.
which is normal, which is usual.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Jean-Marc, j'ai fait 20 ans de prison.
Hello, my name's Jean-Marc, I did 20 years inside.
Donc la personne va répondre, si tu as fait 20 ans de prison, c'est que tu as fait du mal à quelqu'un.
People will reply, well listen, if you did 20 years inside, you've done some bad stuff to people.
Donc ça veut dire que tu peux me faire du mal à moi aussi.
So that means you can do bad things to me too.
Mais j'ai toujours trouvé une 10e porte,
But I always found the 10th door,
qui s'est d'abord entrouverte,
which first of all it was just a jar, opened a crack,
où les gens m'ont tendu la main pour ce que je suis aujourd'hui,
and there people extended a hand to me, and that helped me develop to what I've become today.
et qui ont accepté de faire un bout de chemin avec moi.
And they accepted to go on a journey with me.
Pour moi, il n'y a pas de hasard dans la vie, il n'y a pas de chance.
I don't think there is hazard or chance in life.
Il y a la rencontre humaine,
There is human encounter,
l'art et la culture.
art and culture,
En fait, pour terminer, il faut apprendre,
and so to end, you got to learn,
à désapprendre,
you got to learn to give things up
pour réapprendre.
in order to relearn.
Voilà.
Thank you very much. I'm going to invite the panelists to speak whenever they want to, but I'm also now going to open this up to our audience. If you have any observations you'd like to make or any questions you'd like to ask any of the panelists, sorry, yeah, please do. stick your hands up, maybe introduce yourself, and then we'll take it. Robert!
This is the end of the first week of the festival, and I'm an emotional wreck. Every emotional button has been pressed, but I feel great. And two of the greatest shows that did this were both of your shows, Doubting Thomas and The Man Standing. And it moves us as audience. And we can see that it moves you as performers. One of the great things about live arts is that they are live, they're not glossy, nothing is glamorized. John spoke very interestingly yesterday about how so much violence is glamorized, and these topics are very easy to glamorize. At the same time, we do want, of course, to glamorize the fact that you can, as you say, go from child, Thomas, as you say, to go from the crimes of youth to become an adult, and as Jeremy's talking about, change. That is, in some sense, a glamorous, wonderful thing. But on the whole, we're always up against the idea that we're glamorizing crime, and we glamorize change. And I think that the way you've both done your theatre projects, you've been very intelligent in avoiding that kind of possible accusation of something gritty and real.
Can I just say a quick sentence about that? I am the director, I am an artist, but in my personal history, there is juvenile crime, there is juvenile detention, there is murder, not a murder of a member of my family, there's all sorts of other depths of darkness. So when I make a work like this, I'm actually aware of all these traps that you can fall into. I never ever go to the cinema to look at violent films. I have no interest in it. Anyone that's experienced real violence, I've worked in war zones, places like that, so I know what real violence is like. I have no interest in it. I think I have an interest, a deep interest, in people like Jean-Marc and Thomas, because they actually stand as figureheads that counter all the nonsense about the sexiness of violence. They counter all the nonsense about, hey, this guy's a superhero, he smashed this person, he did this. These are real people who struggled with real ways to find their own voice and to determine their own futures and not be determined by where they were born and the circumstances they found themselves in and the things they had to react to survive. So they're very profound stories. So when Thomas comes to me and he's got journal after journal of his own writing, the job that Mark and I have to do is pretty elemental. It's sorting through with Thomas and selecting things that tell his story as best we can. So I just wanted to say that.
That's fascinating, because I know from speaking with Jean-Michel and Jean-Marc, it was a similar thing that Jean-Marc started talking, they were filming, and then there was so much material that they decided to end up just looking at the 3 years in solitary, because there was so much material. Il y avait tellement de choses à dire que vous avez réduit ça jusqu'aux 3 années de solitaire, en fait, d'isolement, dans le projet.
All the things that he said to the radio,
Yeah.
you know, to Masha, you know,
Yes.
everything was played. You know,
Yes.
so it took, I think, 10 hours of different kind of improvisation,
Wow.
but it was not possible to put it on the stage. So Masha was the filter to tell all the story
in an abridged way, en abrégé. Very good, thank you. Anyone else from the audience have any questions or observations you'd like to make? Or anyone else from the panel would like to add anything? Kenny, what's the present situation in Scotland at the moment? Is violence, violent crime, according to the statistics, is it going up or down? Are new initiatives bearing fruit that you're aware of?
Well, I think statistically, violent crime is going down, which is a good thing. Knife crime, the things that have worked have been the educational involvement. There has to be the sanction, and the sentences have got harsher for knife carrying, but I think it's about changing a culture, because the problem we've got in Scotland is a culture of violence. It actually isn't just in the housing schemes, it's across all of Scottish. It's middle class as well as, in what was the working class areas. I'm Scottish, I'm harder than folk from Belgium, we can go out in all weathers and we all go out in a t-shirt, there's this, we talk it up. our comedy shows on TV are all about, you know, drinking, get a bit lippy and we'll go from a square road in the back. And we think it's funny. We've got to change that. We've got to move away from venerating, you know, toughness, machismo, to actually venerating, you know, other aspects of Scottish society that are much humane. There's so much in Scotland to be proud of. So why is it that we obsess about this? And the point, you know, Jeremy Mahy as well, there is an obsession with violence, whether it's in the Cray brothers or Paul Ferris or anything like that. Violence isn't pretty, but, you know, we've got a media that focuses in on it, and at the same time, through the papers or whatever, then, you know, wants a very judgmental society. So I think there's great progress in Scotland, but it's at grassroots up that the change has to come, and, you know, giving individuals an opportunity, that's the problem. And, you know, I think, to be fair to Tosh and John, although John Carnachy and Harry Burns, this early intervention, that's where it's got to start. When we're trying to sort it out in prisons, then we're rolling back. Yeah. And equally, you know, the other thing is societal change. I remember wandering up one of Edinburgh's hills and somebody was saying to me, what are those old houses and buildings? I said, well, they were actually, they were institutions, they were mental health institutions. Gogarburn, up at where Napier University is. I remember somebody, where have those people gone? Well, they've ended up in prison. Because the biggest problem faced by the Scottish prison service isn't drugs, by far, because alcohol is, you know, taken over as the biggest, you know, factor there. It's mental health. People who frankly need support, need help, who might struggle on their own, you know, end up routine, petty offending. Many years ago, and, you know, we were right to stop putting them into institutions, but we should not simply say, you're on your own. And Tosh and John can probably think about it, but I can think of folk in the constituency I used to represent who either had to run the party flat or they became the victims. It was the only way that they could cope. And actually, as was being said, I think it was Tosh that was saying it, actually prison at some stage became an easier place to be than have your flat taken over to ingratiate yourself or just not being able to cope and being afraid to go out. So addressing mental health is, you know, I think the key part to addressing a lot of the problems in prison, because, you know, the rest of it, prison service does remarkably well on. Yep. But you ask prison officers, who I actually have a lot of respect for, you're asking them to basically do the job of a community psychiatric nurse. They're not trained to do that.
No. This is, for me, the prison system. Prison system's fine. The prison system's fine. It's getting the boys to be more positive when they get into prison. See, between induction wing and putting the boys on the landings, that's where we lose them. That's where we become part of them and us. So if you had somebody like yourselves, John, a mentor in front of them in the induction wing, it'd be that positive attitude straight away. Then it frees up the officers to do the jobs that they need to do. By the time the boy comes on the landing, he's feeling positive, so he'll go to officers, he'll go to other people and say, look, this is where I want to aim for, this is where I want to go. As soon as we put them in amongst the boys, or in the jungle, that's it, they're gone. They become them and us.
Tosh, would you mind explaining a little bit more what you mean then by going on the landing? Just talk us through how it goes when you go inside first of all and then before you go onto the landing.
You get in terrified. You get in lonely.
Right.
You don't know anybody. You might know anybody. You might know somebody. You don't know, but you've still got all the terrifying feelings going through you. And as soon as you get in there, there's a group of people that come to you. You're one of us. Right. So you get strength for that. You get courage for that. But as soon as you do that, that's, you owe them a favour. You are part of what they're up against. And they're up against the system. Do you know what I mean? But the system will work if the boys get the opportunity to see the system. When that prison changed for me, when I became more positive inside prison. And that's what John Luke's saying about, if the boys, we want to get the boys where they're in there. A lot of boys say, fuck it, I'll wait to get out. You can't, it's too late. You'll walk right back into the same issues. We want them to be positive inside prison. Do you know what I mean? We need more interaction inside prison with more positive roles, guys who have been through it. Do you know what I mean? And it just gives you, for me, it breaks the barrier down for them and us. It's like the TSOs in Scotland. Now we've got TSOs in Scotland, through care support officers. They're banging boys up and then taking them out the next day when they're getting liberated and finding them home and getting them their accommodations and getting them to their doctors. That's relationships, that's what we need to do. Because see, when they boys come back in again and Officer John helped him get a house, he's not going to be a bastard anymore, is he? Do you know what I'm saying? He's going to look at him positive. That guy helped me, he put his arm out for me. And that'll make a difference when he gets back in. And somebody else sees him doing it, another younger boy, then he's not going to see it and wrong with it. There's this hidden thing in prison. If you go up to an officer, you're probably a grass. right? And that stops every boy in there for going seeking help because of this attitude that's there. It just floats about the prison. It's just a whisper, but it's there. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, to us, it's like the gospel. And you can't break that. But
Jean-Marc wants to come in on this as well.
Pour revenir un peu à ce que dit monsieur l'ancien ministre de la Justice, avec lequel j'ai pu déjà discuter pas mal de choses, parce que à travers un homme debout, on essaie aussi de faire changer les choses en matière de justice.
Okay, so he's coming back to what Kenny was saying, and he wants to how to change things in terms of the justice system.
Donc il faudrait véritablement investir des moyens financiers dans l'humain, je pense.
Yeah, you've got to really invest in the human side in prisons.
Parce que je pense aujourd'hui que la prison est devenue un business.
Jean-Marc thinks that prison in Belgium has become a business, an enterprise.
Je voudrais donner un exemple.
He's going to give an example.
Que les gens comprennent bien. En Belgique, on vient encore de construire plein de prisons.
So in Belgium, they've just built lots of prisons.
Avec un partenariat privé-public.
So a public-private partnership.
Donc ce sont les citoyens qui payent pour mettre des gens en prison.
It's the general public who are paying to put people in jail.
Comme disait Victor Hugo, quand on ouvre une prison, on ferme une école. Hein.
As Victor Hugo said, when you open a prison, you close a school.
J'ai été dans la dernière prison qui est sortie de terre en Belgique, ultra moderne.
Right, you're in the most modern prison in Belgium.
Et quand je suis arrivé là, j'ai vu la statue d'un homme de 3 mètres de haut.
And there I saw a statue of a man who was 3 meters high.
Sauf qu'il était déposé sur sa tête.
Except he was upended onto his head.
Quand je suis rentré dans cette prison, il y avait un très long couloir qui amenait au cellulaire.
And when I went into that prison, there was a very long corridor which led to the cells.
Dans ce monde hors du monde qu'est la prison.
In that world outside the world, which is prison.
Et des deux côtés des murs, il y avait des toiles de peinture.
On both sides of the walls, there were canvases of paintings.
Très noirs.
Very dark, black.
Et une peinture sur deux, il y avait marqué le mot mort.
And one painting on one in two paintings was the word death.
Et au milieu de ce couloir, j'ai vu la statue de cet homme qui était déposé sur sa tête dehors, à l'horizontale.
And in the middle of that corridor, when I saw again that man who had been placed on his head, now he was in a horizontal position.
Donc j'ai demandé à mon ami, donc il y a la statue d'un homme debout.
So I said to my friend, there's a statue of a man standing.
Non.
No.
Ces œuvres d'art ont coûté 500 000 euros, un peu plus de 450 000 pounds.
So those works of art cost 500,000 euros.
Mais il y a une psychologue dans cette prison pour 300 détenus.
There was one psychologist in that prison for 300 prisoners.
Donc il faut aussi bien se rendre compte que les gens qui sont en prison, même s'ils ont été victimes des circonstances de la vie,
so we've got to understand that there are people in prison, even if they're victims of their life circumstances.
Il ne faut pas oublier qu'ils ont quand même fait des victimes.
Mustn't forget that they have, they're victims of their crimes.
Donc, si on ne fait rien pour ces hommes-là,
so if we don't do anything for those people,
ils vont rester dans la victimisation.
They will remain in a victimized state of victimization.
Il est important de les amener à la colère, de se poser les questions.
It's important to make them sort of be angry, agitated, to make them pose questions of themselves.
Et par de l'aide psychologique,
and with the help of psychological aid,
amener un des plus beaux mots dans la langue française, et pour moi, hein, la résilience.
One of the most beautiful words in French language for me is the word resilience.
C'est l'art et la capacité de rebondir face à un traumatisme qu'on a vécu.
So that's the art and capacity to be able to rebound from a traumatism that one has lived through.
Et je pense que dans les gouvernements,
so I think in governments,
au lieu de penser à construire des prisons, il faudrait vraiment, vraiment investir dans l'humain.
So instead of building prisons, the governments should invest their money in investing in humanity.
Pour que quand quelqu'un ressorte, il soit meilleur qu'avant qu'il y soit rentré pour le bien et la paix de la communauté.
So that when somebody leaves prison, they are better than when they went in for the good and the peace of the community from which they came. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Question from behind the camera, actually. But I've just come out of an inpatient mental health unit. And I'm very aware that class was massively important in how I was treated in there and education as well. That there were people in there who were effectively being in a cycle between the prison system and psychiatric units and were angry. And when they got angry, they got given lorazepam, in quite high doses. A sedative, absolutely. When I was said, when my doctors say, do you want to take, I think we should increase your medication, which they often do, I argue against them on the basis of a degree in philosophy and economics about why I don't think that's appropriate. I quote the statistics at them because I've read the studies and I've researched it on the internet. But there's that ability of my education, and you talked earlier about the importance of education, and everyone's mentioned education, but there is also an inherent classism in our system, where actually it's one of the benefits for me as a Sassenach with an RP accent, that people treat me in a different way, as if, I think sometimes as if my opinion might have more wealth. And that's something that prison officers, that judges, that barristers, that psychologists, and that teachers need to take account of. I think it's very interesting that you mentioned Victor Hugo. And of course, we in the UK, because of the success of Les Miserables as a musical, which was greater here than it was in France, aren't perhaps as familiar with the opening to that. Tant qu'il existera par le fait des lois et des mœurs une damnation sociale créant artificiellement en pleine civilisation des enfers. While we are creating in the middle of our civilization a hell, les livres de la nature de celui-ci ne pourront pas être inutiles. The books like this can't cease to be of use. But he's not talking about to the prisoners, particularly, I mean he is, he's talking about to us, the people who aren't in prison. And it is incumbent on us to make it better. It's not just enough, this is the Bertolt Brecht thing in its 100th year, it's not enough for us just to come and sit in these lectures and go, oh yeah, that was interesting. We've got to actually go out and do something and make more of our MSPs take an interest in this like Kenny's done, and make more of our fellow people and brothers and sisters and neighbours and so on take an interest in it, because it's our fault, not the people in prison. That's just my thought on it.
The same, but I was going to say still reflects on that for me, what we concentrate in society is crime. Let's stop crime, let's fix crime. I'm telling you all now, crime is just a product of the environment and the situations that we find ourselves in. That's the end thing that comes after the product line, if you want to look at it that way. So we need to go back and fix the production line. Put other things there in front of them where they can take before the crime comes along to them. Do you know what I'm saying? Crime is just a product of the environment and the circumstances we find ourselves in. We don't go up in the morning and go, right, I'm going to commit a crime today. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it just happens, it's a mistake, you fall into it. Do you know what I mean? You're young, you're boy, you're full of life, aren't you? But no wisdom. You get the wisdom, so why not share the wisdom?
It's why are people violent? Why are people obese? Why are people turning to drugs? Go back in time. Why?
All young men are the same. You go back in history and look at it. That's what all young men do between the ages. If you got a young man between the ages of 14 and 25, you're going to get a lot of aggression at them, right? And we as people who've been there and done it in adults, we should understand that. Why do we not recognise that? That it's just part of him growing. If we don't guide him, you know what I mean, and show him a different direction, like me, other people shaped me and guided me a different direction. But I could have been the man I'm on now 20 years ago. But nobody gave me a chance, nobody guided us. I was lost. I didn't know how to go. I didn't know how to, but I'm looking at all you as adults, people with knowledge, and saying, help me. What's the point of having knowledge if you don't share it?
Thank you very much. We're running out of time. I think, Kenny, you wanted to say something. Did you?
No, I mean, I think, there's almost a twin strategy. We have to do more in prison. I think that's accepted in all art and therapy equally. We've got to stop putting as many people in prison. I'm not utopian. There have to be prisons. If you rob an old lady of her savings, if you go out and stab somebody, the society in which we live, you are going to jail. There is no alternative to that, but far too many people are in prison who should not be there. And what that means is that prison officers cannot do the job and cannot provide it. I mean, they're not provided with the resources. I could use the example, here we are in the dissection room of what used to be the Dick Beck College of Edinburgh University, but I would get challenges when I was Justice Secretary, why don't you more on education, why aren't you providing this? Could you imagine if this was still Edinburgh University and you said, every course is going to be in the dissection room. Doesn't matter whether it's first year geology or whether you're doing a PhD in nanotechnology, it's going to be here. And the people in the main who will be looking after you will be the janitors. We'll have the odd visiting professor. Get on with it. But that is the reality of prison. You know, we can do better, we need to do better, but let's not delude ourselves. You know, a hospital is not a prison. It cannot be a university. It can provide, you know, healthcare and must. It can provide education and should do better. But at the end of the day, let's realise that their primary task is to keep people secure and safe in there and from escaping. And although you can do better, you can't do everything. What you've got to do, and the priority is to get the numbers down, put those who need to be in and be able to provide the resources and work with them. And until we change the society that they've done something, and the number of times, you know, I thought there was a tragic case of somebody being killed by, you know, dangerous driving, and the criticism, you know, it's always, they've only got 6 years. Well, you know, I can remember I was Justice Secretary and there was demands for, you know, mandatory sentences on knife crime. 6 months, said Labour. 2 years, said the Tories. Why stop there? Why not make it 20 or 220? I mean, where's it going to end? There's this continual upgrading. The reason that prison numbers have gone up has not simply been mental health. That's one aspect. But we've become a lot harsher in sentencing. You know, people are now going to prison for longer. Now, some see that as, you know, long overdue. I have to say, I don't see that as necessary. Prison is harsh, it is unpleasant, it isn't a jaunt, and this idea that it's got to be 60 years or 40 years or 20 years, no, it doesn't. You shouldn't be going for short sentences, but this idea that we'll have a successful society because somebody's just got 47 years or something like that is just nonsense.
Kenny, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Jean-Marc, we've only got 1 minute left, so Jean-Marc, tu as 1 minute pour conclure. Et tu as parlé d'un livre que tu veux mentionner aussi.
Oui, comme j'ai lu beaucoup de livres en prison.
So as you read a lot of books in prison,
j'ai envie de parler pour moi et pour Thomas.
He wishes to speak on behalf of himself and Tosh.
C'est un écrivain anglais qui s'appelle H.G. Lawrence.
He's going to say something about from a book by an English writer called Archie Lawrence.
Et il dit, si on pouvait avoir 2 vies.
If we could only have 2 lives.
La première où on commet des erreurs.
First in which we make mistakes.
Et la seconde où on va s'en servir.
And the second where we're going to make use of these.
Voilà, c'est ma conclusion.
And that's his conclusion. Great, thank you all very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen.